You can't quit your toxic job, at least not yet. You've run the numbers, and right now, leaving costs more than staying. But your job is consuming you. It's the first thing that you think about in the morning, and it's why you toss and turn at night. It's the ghost at your dinner table. I'm a criminologist who tripped and fell up the career ladder in tech, and I have helped thousands of people who are trapped just like you. Today, I'm giving you the Stay and Win framework, which is a proprietary 7-move system that I developed to help you stop giving an F about your toxic job. The first move is so simple that you can do it right now. Mentally resign. I call this cognitive quitting, which is 10 times more powerful than quiet quitting. Remember when that was all the rage? When you cognitively quit, you are mentally resigning from your toxic job, psychologically checking out of there. You stop caring about it. Every client I have that is still in a toxic job does this, and the shift that they describe is immediate and surprising. But it doesn't surprise me because it is grounded in social science. Researchers call this psychological detachment, and studies show it is one of the most powerful protective strategies available to help people in high-stress environments, like a toxic workplace. I did this myself when I was in the most toxic job of my life. I couldn't hand in my 2-week notice, so I cognitively quit, and it changed the game. My toxic boss can yell all he wanted, and it wouldn't faze me. And it makes sense. In order for you to be bothered by your toxic coworkers' drama, your micromanaging boss, or the unfair system that is rewarding the worst people at work, you have to care. But when you cognitively quit, you stop carrying the mental loads that were never yours to carry. You're physically there, you're meeting the expectations required to keep your job, but you can't be bothered by it when you don't give a f. You're not concerned about the toxic office gossip around you. You're not available for your boss's after-hours emergency. And you know that this job has an expiration date, and when you escape it, none of this is going to matter. This is how you create an emotional buffer that protects your peace amidst the chaos, how you leave work at work, and most importantly, how you can minimize the harm a toxic workplace does to you. Because it's really trying to maximize damage to keep you there and control you. So while you can't quit your toxic job yet, you can mentally quit right now. In fact, I want you to claim this energy in the comments. Write, I cognitively quit, and what you are no longer psychologically invested in at work. You will notice a shift immediately when you do. And this shift is necessary for the next move in the Stay and Win framework. This isn't just an internal shift. It's quitting a role they forced you into without your knowledge, but with your consent. And toxic people get away with their deviant behavior when you do this. Have you seen that scene in Fight Club where the homework is to go and start a fight? Club members are really out there trying to start one, but most people avoid it. And it's funny to watch, but again, it's explained by social science. It's the same reason why toxic people get away with doing what they do at work. Conflict avoidance. As long as you keep the peace, other people can behave badly. Of course, you don't do this on purpose. You are in the peacekeeping position out of necessity. When you are surrounded by constant threats in a toxic workplace, it triggers a hardwired threat response, conflict avoidance. You want to avoid conflict, and your brain in particular wants to avoid it. In evolutionary psychology, this is called appeasement behavior, and it runs deep. It's why when your micromanaging boss baselessly rips apart your work, or a passive-aggressive coworker makes some snippy remark that only you're supposed to register, you smile, you accept it, you don't escalate. But unless you're actually part of the Peace Corps, you need to stop keeping the peace at work, unless you want your toxic coworker to exploit this instinct, because you were probably conflict averse even before you found yourself in a toxic workplace. At some point in your life, you learned that appeasement was safer than conflict, and it became your default. This is the fawn response. It's a hybrid survival response where you're both active in fight and flight, but also in dorsal vagal shutdown at the same time. Essentially, placate the threat until it leaves you alone. There's also a face-saving element involved to this one. My client Sheena actually had a scenario that demonstrated this issue really well. Her coworker Avery was an incredibly toxic human being. You know the kind, always miserable, always stirring up drama, always looking for a target. Well, one day, Avery chose Sheena as her target. In the middle of a meeting, Avery made a joke about the standard of work Sheena did on a project. Sheena was frozen. She didn't want people to think that her work was subpar or that she was a slacker. She was flustered and she got quiet. Part of the reason for that was to save face. She knew Avery would pretend that she was joking when she wasn't and would make people think that she was overreacting if she said anything. She didn't want people to think that she was overly sensitive, so she didn't say anything. But by saving face, she really saved Avery's face because the joke, which really was malicious commentary, stood. And it had a subconscious impact on how Sheena was perceived. Avery got to keep her plausible deniability in front of leadership. There was also an element going on here where Sheena was trying to minimize the toxic exposure for everyone around her, which brings us directly into our next move. In criminology, we know that systems need to be enabled to function. In a toxic workplace, you have been the enabler not because you want to, but because the system manipulated you into it. Move 3 is where you put an end to that. This is the hardest truth in this entire video. You need to know that what you do does not matter. You can tiptoe around your emotionally explosive boss, overperform to meet expectations you were never told, and be the umbrella that protects everyone around you from the toxicity. Every high performer I have worked with has become the shock absorber for the toxic work environment. You absorb the dysfunction so the system doesn't have to change. I learned this the hard way myself. As a professional services and customer success leader in tech, one of my highest value assets was my ability to work with anyone. I had a reputation for it, but then I got a boss who was unreasonable, incompetent, and psychologically abusive. But I kept telling myself, I can work with anyone. I kept fixing the problems he created until one day my body couldn't handle the stress anymore and I ended up in the hospital. For starters, you will never prove yourself to your boss. Nothing you do will ever be good enough. Trying will only run you into the ground. More importantly, it sets you up for what criminologists like me call victim precipitation. You start blaming yourself for the toxicity. If you had just asked the right question, tried a little harder, or learned how to read other people's minds, you could fix it. The toxic workplace blames you to brainwash you to blame yourself. They make you the scapegoat for all of the problems so that they don't have to hold the bag. Your effort to fix it is thrashing against the current. There's a sociological concept that actually explains this: institutional inertia. Toxic work environments are almost impossible to fix. Fixing them requires top-down commitment, sustained effort, and a significant amount of resources, and it still fails most of the time. So how are you supposed to fix it alone? And the thing is, the toxicity is a feature, not a bug. I've observed more than 3,000 toxic work situations, and the pattern is always the same. The system is not broken. It is working exactly as it was designed. Just not for you. Knowing that there is nothing that you can do to change a toxic work environment, you need to know that there is one thing that you can change, and it is imperative that you do in order to survive the toxic work environment. You cannot change the toxic work environment, but you can change the lens through which you evaluate yourself inside of it. In a toxic job, your ring of reference is the people around you, your boss, your coworkers, colleagues on other teams. The toxic behaviors have been normalized for all of them, which is why when you try to sanity check yourself with a coworker after your boss's outburst, they shrug and say, he's not always like that. The risk here is that toxic behavior gets normalized, that you stop perceiving it for what it is. Not only will that trap you longer than you need to be there, but that ring of reference will distort your expectations and put you in more toxic work dynamics. You need to maintain a ring of reference outside of the toxic workplace, one that reassures you that it's not you, it's them. Which brings me to move 4, because the longer you stay in a toxic job, the more your sense of reality gets warped. Move 4 in the stay in one framework is aimed directly at that. The toxic workplace system is designed to escalate. 6 months ago, your job would have dropped if you saw your manager belittling a coworker. Now, that's just another Tuesday. Toxic work environments start small and they get progressively worse, which means the longer you stay, the worse it will get. But you can't see it happening. When you're in a toxic workplace, you are a lobster in a boiling pot of water, and the other lobsters are dragging you back into it. You need to be prepared, because the longer you stay, the higher the stakes are going to get. Most people think of documentation as legal protection, and it is, though I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice, please hire one. But it's also not why I'm going to tell you to do it. Documentation is a psychological life preserver. When you're in a toxic work environment, you are surrounded by negativity. There are not positive inputs. You never get validation that you're doing good at your job, let alone praise for it. All you get is criticism. I had a client, let's call her Amanda, who had decades of experience with an impeccable track record. But Amanda sat in a session with me and genuinely could not name one thing that she had accomplished in the past year, despite the fact that I knew she was regularly doing remarkable work. That's what institutional gaslighting does. It doesn't just distort your reality. It erases your evidence of yourself. Now, the first thing that I want you to put into your evidence locker: your accomplishments. You need to keep track of these because no one else is going to. Then when performance review time comes, or when it's finally time to start plotting your escape, you open it up and you use it. It's also proof when you need it that you don't suck. You are awesome and you are not the problem. Second, incidents. Your boss made an inappropriate pass at you. Your coworker said something racist AF. They subtly implied that if you didn't accept an unethical assignment, that there would be consequences. Log it in your evidence locker. Date, time, where, what happened, and who witnessed it. Think of it as your corporate crime scene report. And finally, assignments. Toxic people get very confused about whose job is whose, conveniently in a way that's always in their favor. Put everything in writing. Use an AI tool to take notes in meetings. Send annoying recap emails about who agreed to what and on what timelines. Then, when they try to throw you under the bus, your receipts are ready. If it helps to think of yourself as an undercover agent collecting evidence to prove your case, do it. This is going to make sure that you're ready for the next move in the stay and win framework. This one is going to make you feel powerful and stop playing defense because you are playing offense now. You are working with people who are shady and deceptive and who are scheming against you. You need to start scheming for yourself. Okay, that sounds way more diabolical than it really is, but when you're dealing with an evil mastermind, you need to match the energy, you know? First thing you're going to do, plot your escape.
But Jennifer, I can't quit right now. That's why I'm here.
I'm not arguing with you. You did the math and you made the decision to stay for now. I don't think that you're wrong. But I do know that toxic work environments are extremely unpredictable. The calculus can change in unpredictable ways. For example, one of my clients, we'll call her Jill, was in a toxic workplace. She was waiting for an equity vest before she plotted her escape. It was enough money to make staying worth the stress. What she didn't count on was her incompetent boss being exposed and sacrificing her that he wouldn't end up on the chopping block. This all shifted rapidly. Luckily, she was working with me and she had the Stay in One framework implemented, so she was ready. Her resume, her LinkedIn profile, they were up to date. She was building a personal brand, so when she saw shit going sideways, she started accepting job interviews. If she was going to lose her job and her equity, she was going to control the exit. Luckily, it didn't come to that. The receipts from her evidence locker protected her. But there is nothing worse than being blindsided by an unplanned exit from a toxic job. If you've ever been fired from one, it literally feels like being broken up with by a guy that you went on a pity date with. To scramble in that moment puts you at a disadvantage and it leaves a deeper psychological mark. Having a plan B is never a bad idea, especially in this market. Even if you don't use it, knowing that it's there or that you're ready if you need it is going to offer you peace of mind and it's going to boost your confidence when it counts, like how it did for Jill. The second scheme is about minimizing your exposure while you ride it out. I've worked with people who were riding out a toxic job because they knew that they would outlast their new toxic boss or they were close to getting a pension. In these cases, they schemed to minimize their exposure. How can you maximize your time out of office? Or how can you minimize your dealings with the toxic people? The third scheme is the most extreme. The lawsuit. If you think that a legal case is building, step one is finding an employment attorney ASAP. Knowing your rights before you need them and getting a consult on how to build the best case against them is a power move. Now, you can use one of these schemes or you can use all of these schemes or you could just be ready for them. No matter what, move 6 is now a non-negotiable. Your toxic job is hell-bent on destroying your career, your confidence in your life. Move 6 is going to make all of their efforts futile because you're about to build something that they cannot touch no matter how hard they try. And they're gonna try. When you cognitively quit, stop keeping the peace and stop trying to fix a toxic work environment. They're gonna notice. Toxic people will not go quietly into the night. Instead, they're going to ratchet up their toxic behavior because they depend on one thing: your reaction. You stopped giving it to them, and now they are going to escalate to try to force you to react. You took away their toy. Of course, they're going to have a fit, and they are going to get your reaction unless you've done this to protect your peace. Set up a cognitive barrier. One of the earliest lessons that I learned when I was working towards my criminology degree is a concept that I've recognized throughout my career in corporate America: symbolic interactionism. Your sense of self is constructed by your interactions with the people around you, including toxic people at work. They need you to believe untrue, awful things about yourself, because if you saw yourself clearly, you would see them clearly too. So they distort the mirror from which you see yourself. Your cognitive barrier will refuse that reflection. To survive a toxic workplace, you must have a filter. It is going to block out false urgency, unfair criticism, and so much more. Here's what they don't want you to know. Their opinion is only as valid as their authority to make it, and most of them have no authority. What your coworker thinks doesn't matter because they lack authority. Your toxic boss's unfair teardown of your work is invalid because they lack the competence and the emotional maturity to make such a judgment. People who lack the standing don't deserve your attention. Ignore their opinion like it's someone else's lunch order. It has nothing to do with you. I also want you to learn how to be too dumb to be offended. This is one thing about being smart in a toxic workplace. You clock everything, the patterns, the intentions, the subtext. You see every slight, and your justice orientation makes it impossible to ignore. But what if you could ignore it? When you're blissfully unaware, you're not just surviving, you're protecting your peace. This doesn't just mitigate harm in a toxic workplace, it decreases the toxicity that you actually experience. Sheena used this move on Avery. One day, Avery made some standard backhanded comment about Sheena, but Sheena wasn't going to let this one slide. So she pretended to be dumb as a rock and she asked Avery, "What do you mean?" Avery didn't know what to do, but everyone around her was waiting for her to explain herself. She couldn't without exposing her toxicity. So she mumbled something, walking back what she said. And yes, Sheena did love watching Avery fight for her life in that moment. And Avery's snippy comments stopped after that. That said, while a toxic workplace weaponizes your intelligence against you, you can turn the tables on them because the more that you see, the more you see through and the more positioned you are to survive unscathed and unbothered. Every other move in this framework relies on this next one. This is the wall that makes it all stick. And it separates the victims of a toxic work environment from the victors. Clarity. Knowing exactly what you're dealing with and how to deal with it. The thing is, if you haven't nailed each of these moves, you're at risk of falling into the toxic job loop. That's a cycle that you've probably been stuck in. Denial, awareness, rationalization on repeat. Right now, you're in awareness. But the toxic workplace was designed to pull you back into rationalization and straight into denial. If you fall back into denial, you will be fooled into thinking that you don't need a survival plan until the toxicity escalates again. Then you're back at square one, watching this video again. You deserve better than that. Now you know the stay and win framework exists. You have the option to escape that toxic job loop. That's why I created the Toxic Job Survival Guide. It doesn't just go through each move in way more detail than I can go into in this video. It walks you through each one to make a survival plan just for you. And it's designed to be as simple as possible because I know that when you're in a toxic job, it's draining everything that you have. If you're in a toxic workplace, this is the fastest path to become unbothered and minimize the damage that your toxic job can do to you. You can get it at toxicjobsurvival.com. You came into this video consumed by something that was never meant to consume you. That ends now. And once you have it in place, the next thing that you need to do is you need to learn how to outsmart toxic people to remove that target off your back entirely. I made this video to teach you exactly how to do that. I'll see you over there.